Okay, got it.
Okay, we are here. Yay, we made it.
All right.
Hooray for us.
Yay. So this is Lauren and Lisa from Art is Moving. This is our first podcast of 2023. We're really excited because we have John Brandon here from the East Coast. And John, tell us a little bit about yourself and what is this John Brandon, the story behind that?
Well, my name is John Brandon Sills. I'm a professional artist living in Baltimore. Born and raised here. Been a professional artist over 30 years, maybe coming on 35 now, which is crazy in and of itself. Story about the John Brandon was when I first started my career, I was going by John Sills. And then my brother got married, and my mom's maiden name is Brandon. And all my aunts and cousins who were probably in their 80s by this time, all of them about 5 feet tall, got in a circle around me, and they're all my grandfather's nieces and stuff. And we're doing that. You get your talent from the Brandon side of the family. You have to use Brandon in your name. And,
oh, wow.
They were terrifying. So ever since then, I've been John Brandon Sills.
Oh, that's good. Way to respect your family and your elders.
Right.
That's good. That's good.
It felt like survival at the time.
We can call it respect now. So like we always do, we always have a question that we start with asking. And today we wanted to ask you, how can art help you get through fear? And so just roll with it and see how that goes.
I mean, I find art, it brings me back to my concept of art, which is that it's an experience and it's an expression. And the experience originates and generates from myself. Okay. And that if I want to enlarge and expand and be genuine with my art, then I have to look within myself for that inspiration, for that source, for that truth. And during that process, or the fundamental aspect of that process, was the first thing I had to do was recognize how afraid I was. And it goes back long before I was an artist. It was a learned response, a Pavlovian response. There's things you're taught when you're a kid that you don't even know you're being taught.
Yeah.
And there were things like, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve, I'm not one of those people, not me. Any form of self-negation. And I've had a meditative practice for 25 years now. And that process of quieting the mind, going within, and to recognize that much of my life was based on fear. It was based on the fear of loss or the fear of not getting, but fear was the fundamental energy of whatever it was I was doing, thinking, feeling, believing. And I read in a book one time, fear is false evidence appearing real.
Yes.
And so for me to say, if that's false, then what's true? And to first allow my fear to not dictate my experience. Fear is that which negates, controls, or limits. It says, I won't, it can't, not me. And which is false. It's just false.
Yeah.
And the ultimate, I won't say the ultimate, that's a little dramatic. But one of the primary experiences I had was, this would have been maybe about 2010. In 2009, my fiance passed away from cancer. And so in that period afterward, I was doing a lot of meditating, dealing with grief, dealing with loss, dealing with fear. A lot of, what do I do now?
Yeah.
All the plans just went.
Yeah.
Right.
And in one of my meditations, I was using as the fundamental inquiry the statement from the Judeo-Christian text, let it be done unto you as you believe. And looking at that as if that is a statement of truth, if that is a statement of the nature of creation, my creative essence, well, then what do I believe about me? Really? Not what do I tell myself I believe about me? I'm great, and doesn't everybody wish they were me? Rather, what do I really believe, truly? And so I sat with that. And one of the first things I believed was I was going to have to teach to make a living because I wasn't good enough to make it from the sales of life. And that was an accurate representation of what my life was at that time. That was exactly my life. I had to teach to make it. And for me, it's always the inquiry is like, well, why do I believe that? And in going deeper and deeper, and I believe revelation is like digging a well. You remove everything between you and the water. It's a process of removal, not of doing.
Right.
And but why do I believe that? And I knew I was talented. I could draw, I could paint. But I didn't believe I was creative. That was the underlying issue. I knew I had talent, but I didn't believe I was creative. So at that time, I painted like Monet or George Enes or John Singer Sargent. I painted like them because if they were good, if I could paint like them, then I'm good.
Okay.
But underneath that was the realization that they were good because they were being themselves. They were being genuine. They were being authentic. And when I looked at that, I got down to what I said just a moment ago, that I knew I was talented, but I didn't believe I was creative. That if I painted a John Brandon Sills, nobody would like it. That I didn't. I didn't have a voice that would inspire others, would motivate others, was uniquely my own. And that was the fundamental belief I had about me. I could draw, I could paint, but I wasn't creative.
I want to interject. What in your inquiry, what did creativity mean to you? Like, if you could define it for our audience, or for like, what is creativity, or what is it to be creative?
For me, in my current belief system, creativity is the expression of my essence, my truth, my reality, my being a capital M. Not the mental gyrations of society, culture, or what have you, but rather the essence of my truth, my nature, if you will, true nature. Again, not all the nature of things that I was told by whoever that made up all the ideas about, that comes after the phrase, I'm the kind of person that, anything that came after that to me was false. It was a construct. It wasn't. I like to say that I lived from all these old ideas, and when I looked at it, I realized none of them were my ideas. They were other people's ideas that I just chose to believe because, okay, if you say so, that's the way it is. And to move out of that there is a way that it is. There's no way in particular. So, and to ask myself, what is it I desire? If this realm, this duality is about manifesting desires and experiences, which there's a realm beyond that, but at this level, what is it I desire? And I was looking at art, the general, and I felt like a lot of it was about the drama du jour. People were painting problems, people were painting their angst. And I felt like anybody can paint a problem and anyone can paint their personal angst. But it takes an artist to paint a solution.
I like that.
I think that's I have to argue with that. I actually don't think a lot of people can paint their angst and their stuff like that. I mean, because what I find interesting about this conversation is most of the people that we run into in the work that we do are the opposite. They're worried about the talent aspect of it. And I'm finding this conversation really interesting because it was almost like you're like, I can do all that. I just can't almost touch that source of myself, right? It feels like you had to go through this journey of self-awareness in order to reach that spot where it's almost, in art school, they would probably talk about finding your style, right? That was sort of what I always struggled with in art school, is that I had no idea what my style was. I still really kind of don't. I think I'm the type of person that's always on a sort of this mission of self-discovery. And so maybe I'll never get there. But I don't think actually a lot of people can, I think a lot of people are afraid, like you were saying. I think they're afraid of their own fear and their own angst. And so they're not, willing to almost touch that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, that's the part about where fear is constricting and fear limits, the courage to move through the fear. And sometimes, and at this point, again, my fiance ways before I met my current beautiful, amazing, wonderful girlfriend. And so it was a very dark time. And it was a time of deep self-reflection. And so to get to those, the essence of how do you move through fear is, first off, what am I afraid of? Why? And am I willing to at least try to move through? And what occurred, it's funny you should say that what occurred with the rest of this experience was sitting in that meditation, recognizing that I was afraid I wasn't creative, meaning that I could inspire or touch others. The mantra that came through is the answer is yes. That no is not in the universal vocabulary. We invented no. Yeah. That if I believe it, the answer is yes. And so that has been my mantra ever since. But having a mantra is meaningless unless I put it in action.
Yeah.
So what I did the very next day was go down to my studio, get the largest canvas I had, and just paint. I did this. I brushed my teachers off my shoulders. And I was as authentic as I could. And my style changed radically. But not by intellectualizing and figuring out. My style just became. It was authentic beingness. I just let my hand move on the canvas without any particular reason why. It just felt genuine. And I didn't worry about, well, I should do this first, and then I show this compositional arrangement is blah, blah, blah. I just, was sort of that emptiness you hear about in many meditations and spiritual practice. And then just allowed it to happen, which is a nice word, because by allowing it to happen, I'm saying I'm not running. The fear would be, what I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this because this is proven. It's sort of stepping into the unknown. It's, for me, it was a profound act of faith in whatever you choose to call it. I have no, the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao.
So go ahead, Lisa.
I'm sorry, because I've been through loss and grief too, and it's an abyss. It's something you don't know until you touch it. Do you feel like the grief cracked you open to have courage? And do you think you could have got there without that loss?
I think it provided the opportunity.
Yeah.
But there's no, it really comes down to personal choice, I believe.
Yeah.
Do I choose to use this to enlarge and go deeper, or do I use this to do something like run? Maybe grab another relationship to try and feel better. So I think that time of quiet reflection, a form of a rigorous self-honesty.
Right. Yeah.
What do I really believe?
I think it's interesting that you say that you're like that most people kind of at the time, or most artists are painting or portraying, I guess, their angst, almost their fear. And you're attempting to move beyond that and get to the solution. So it seems to me that you're trying to represent what it looks like to move beyond fear. Is that correct?
That's what it is for me in my personal experience. And one thing to add to that is that in this meditation, my fiance came through and she made the statement, "We are one, we can never be separate." And so that became what I choose to paint, the solution, oneness. And that's how my style changed, because before it was all these very standard impressionist looking plein air paintings. And then the problem became how does one paint oneness? Right? This is the artistic challenge of the creativity. How do you do that? And the experience that came out of this and the decision I made came to me after I just started painting was where you remove everything that separates. It's not by adding something, but it's by the removal of it. And so what did I do? I started removing edges, because edges separate. And so the sky blended into the trees blended into the land, and it became an expression of oneness. And as I observe the world in my own personal belief system, that's the solution. All the problems we have arise from believing that separation exists.
Wow.
Right. Or believing we need to separate things into categories and
Which is a
labels
function
and
of the
whatnot.
mind. The mind does that on its own. You know, the mind needs to
Yeah.
be able to tell the difference between the grass and the lion's face.
Right. Right.
Right.
Right. Yes, please.
know?
Yeah. Right.
So in that
Yeah.
sense, it has a purpose.
Yeah.
It's just being, shall we say, used for aspects for which it was not intended.
Yeah. So I find this interesting because it's all, a lot of it is, would you say that it seems to me that it's like you are going through this process of meditation, but also of like ponderance. It's almost like you meditate, you make art, and then you ponder about it, and then you meditate, you make more art, because you're still the process still feels very thought-based to me, because you're saying you looked at it and you're like, nope, it's still separate. So I need to take the work further. I need to take my work, my personal work further, and then take the physical reflection of that further in terms of the painting.
That certainly happened as I chose to pursue this style.
Okay.
But again, this style simply emerged.
Mm-hmm.
I had a concept, I had a vision of something I had seen in like 1997 or something. But I'd never painted it because I classified myself and limited myself as I'm a plein air artist.
Mm-hmm.
So that means I have to be on location, blah, 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 all the constrictions that come from that. So in this experience, I went down to the studio and I just painted that scene. I could visualize it in my head. So I just started painting. Didn't turn out exactly like the visualization, but it was the moving through the fear of, I need a reference. I can't just make things up out of my head. I'm not that good. If I'm genuine and authentic, it won't inspire people. And again, the funny thing about it was the painting was so large, I had my art school, my studio was in an art school, art adult classes mainly. And the painting was so big that I had to do it in the main classroom. And everyone kept coming up going, well, that's different for you. And of course, you're like, different good, different bad,
Right,
so
right.
every day it was, am I going to commit to this? Am I going to commit to this? And then after that, there was the contemplative aspect, the what now aspect that I always think that I'll say that creativity is always answering the question, now what?
No.
Oh, yeah.
I've done this, now what? And my old ideas were, well, you go from here to there.
Yeah.
And that there are no parameters there are no specific answers or better answers to that question. I mean, the other thing that is interesting is that having seen the piece emerging from me, if you will, it's then the process of assigning meaning. What does it mean?
Meaning.
And that in my past, I had been told what things mean. This occurs, it means that. You do this, it means the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
And coming into the space of infinite creation is that meaning is something I make up. Meaning is not intrinsic, but rather is a creation that I impose past ideas, upbringing, religious concepts, whatever. I pose that on the experience rather than allowing the meaning to evolve for myself. And that brought me back to, left to my own devices, I'm bad.
Oh boy, yeah.
That if I come up with it, it's got to be bad. It has to be evil or whatever negative connotation you want to give it. That I can't find a rich and beautiful light in myself. I am not the light. I am anything but the light. And to allow myself to be the light.
So is that like a constant thing that you have to constantly focus on, or do you feel like you're there now? Right? Is it something that creeps back and forth?
I would say my manifestation is, shall we say, inconsistent.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
'cause
I mean, my
people
next
say, I
question.
don't do it
Yeah.
perfectly, but I think imperfection is part of perfection.
Yeah.
You know, the
Yeah.
fact that, we want to judge, even the idea of perfection itself is a judgment, because the
Oh, for
idea,
sure. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because it
Yeah.
includes this, but not that.
Right.
But
Right. Right.
the isness contains all of it, the light and the
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
again, to remove judgment,
Yeah.
foundation in the idea of I know, I know, I know, I know. It's the omnipotence of playing God.
It's a beautiful conversation. I'm curious about because you said creativity is inspiration. So the people that now view your work and collect your work, do they get that, or is it kind of like a subtle revelation for them, or do they know that wow, this is I'm witnessing unity consciousness on some level?
They do, because I don't have a problem talking about it. Generally, the way I hear it, and I'm sure many other artists, and hopefully there are many other artists listening,
Mm-hmm.
generally have it referred to, there's just something about it. There's
Yeah.
just something there. And I heard a friend of mine say, when the divine shows up, since we have no word for it, we call it something.
I like that.
Something happened.
Right.
And so I hear
Yeah.
that a lot. And I have people, friends of mine and collectors who we have these discussions, but they felt it right away.
Mm.
It's when we seek to label it with a word that they began to falter. Well, I
Mm.
provided the word. And again, the word doesn't define. It's, again, the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. We get hung up on the word.
Right.
The word is
Right.
just an attempt to describe. It doesn't actually define it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you're more interested in the experience that someone has at that moment they see something.
Right. I'm more
Yeah.
interested that they can go within themselves, feel it, recognize it, to recognize, to know again as themselves, and then carry that experience when they go outside
Right.
and live
Yeah.
in the world. That they no
Right.
longer experience or perceive themselves as separate from anything else.
Mm.
Okay. So yeah, go ahead.
No, I would just say it would change the nature of my experiences with you. Because if I see
Right.
you as me, why would I want to do anything negative or harmful?
Yes,
Mhm, mhm.
that's right.
That's the oneness. So
The
what would
oneness.
what would you say to someone who um has recognized the fact that they're sort of operating in a world of fear with their work or lack thereof work? What would be maybe an initial step they could take?
That's why I like the mantra. The answer is yes. Because
Okay.
it provided me a certain degree of comfort. Again, this is all sort of a faith-based experience. So that if I take the action, because that's generally the final building block to moving through fear, is then putting that faith, that belief, whatever you want to call it, in action. I had to go down and paint my very first firefly paint. I had to go do that, because then that, what I'll call the spiritual experience, is made manifest, meaning it appears in a physical form, and I can see it and others can interact with it. But the experience of painting it is the self-realization that the fear is false. But I can't experience the falseness of a fear until I put something else into action.
Okay. So it requires because I think that we encounter a lot of people who won't even kind of pick up that pencil, pick up that marker out of they right. So and so we've created art breaks that don't even involve pen or marker or paper or drawing. It's more of looking for shapes in nature and listening, right? Turning the world around you into an orchestra. What if someone is not even willing to do that action? I'm always asking this question because I'm always curious. And it's like, you can think of it in an art way. You can also think of it in a personal way. And I guess I'm answering my own question when it's like, if you're not ready to do it, it's probably not going to happen. I mean, is there a solution? Is it
Well, I mean,
education?
if you say you can't, right? Words
Yeah.
are creative. You're a creative entity. You know, you are that which is manifest, is what we call physical. So your word is creative. If you're not willing, then I guess the question is, and this is where the self-inquiry, well, why? Why am I not
Yeah.
willing? You know, and then it's usually what it was usually for me was a fundamental fear about what others would think.
Judgment.
And
Okay.
the other thing was, if I give it my everything, and what if it's bad? What if it confirms all those negative concepts I have about myself? You know,
Right.
what if it doesn't inspire people? You know, and so be willing to move into that. And it's a tremendously courageous act.
It is.
But you can do it in the quiet of your own room. Nobody ever has to see it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's for me, what you're facing is your own self-judgment. And we are our own, like we're really cruel to ourselves.
We're so
And
mean.
so you
Yeah.
have to confront that. I think that's what you're talking about, that judger which resides, or that inner critic, we call it, right?
Right. The obstacles I place over it. You know, when I say digging a well, you know, when I'm digging a well to get the water's already there.
Yes.
You know, the taking the action doesn't create the water. What I did was the removal of, I'm not good enough, it won't work, they won't like it, I won't make money. And every one of those was a shovelful of fear, doubt, insecurity, inferiority. I am not, it won't, you know, and it can be terrifying.
Yeah.
Yet my experience of it is that having made that effort and continuing to do it, the results are beyond description. And to experience the truth of my being, to sit in meditation and see that white light and recognize it as is there aren't words for it, but it changed my relationship to this entire realm of duality. That love is not something I seek, and love is what I
am. Oh, I like that.
Me too.
And so that when I dug to the depths of myself through these fear, what I found was love. What we call love. Again, there's no word for it. The isnness,
Right.
Tao, the Buddha consciousness, whatever you choose to. No word described. As they say in the East, no thought has reached it, no tongue is touched. But it is what I am, and that is the oneness, that we are all that. And so the benefit for me and others have done for me is maybe I'm seeking, but I don't have to seek alone. And I can sit with someone and they can say, I see you. And since I don't doubt their love for me, I can use that to enlarge my courage and put myself in action, because I believe in what you told me, not what I told myself.
That's beautiful. I want to answer your question a little bit, Lauren, because what you're hinting at, John, is that if you can just taste that nectar of love, which doesn't have a word, I mean, your life will transform. So if I'm fear-based, and I know that's out there, you know what I mean, that I can just even touch it for a moment in time. I mean, that would be the solution or the reward to just take action, take an art break, create, right?
Yeah.
And
I like the aspect of, like, if you can't even get yourself to take an art break because there is so much fear surrounding art for a lot of people, to ask yourself why are you afraid of a marker and a piece of paper? Why are you afraid of a pen? And then it's the why ladder, right? You just constantly ask yourself why. Well, why?
And even while you're alone, why are you afraid?
Yeah, right. Because yeah.
I mean,
right.
if it's a piece of paper, you can burn it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Rip it apart, man, and then put it back together.
And I have to acknowledge that in an earlier phase of my life, I loved my drama. I loved I'm the tortured artist. I loved it. You know, how are you today, John? Well, let me tell you, it was delicious.
Yeah.
It's just when I got tired of it,
Yeah.
it became stale. And that inner, just I was done, and so I had a friend of mine talking about spiritual seeking. He used to say, my friend Stan would always say, it's easy to surrender when there's nothing left to defend. And
That's interesting. Yeah.
just that idea of, it was such a fight. It took so much energy. And I just didn't want to do it anymore. And,
Yeah.
but the interesting part was that when I changed my mind, I am this, I am not that. That's where the mind can play a role in this. And I saw it. A path was already there. It's just the mind that says that's not the path. Mind that says if you go down that path, you could be hurt, you could be harmed, something horrible could occur. It's all a play of the mind.
Yeah.
And so it's the mind that prevents the hand from moving across the page. But art doesn't come from the mind. Art originates in what I call the heart, and moves up and is shepherded by the intellect. Is this line long enough? Is that value dark enough? But it doesn't determine. So we speak of, you talked about an artist's inspiration. Well, it comes from the Latin, inspiration comes from the Latin in spiritus. It means in the spirit. So an artist's inspiration is what I call a spiritual experience. It's not a thing. We think art is painting, drawing, poetry, music, film. We call them the arts. Art is an experience that is manifested, expressed, pushed out as painting, poetry. But the art is within oneself. It is, we could call it our nature, our beingness. We are art.
For sure. That's right up your alley, Lisa. And I think that one of my favorite things about like art, it just popped in my head, is that it's because I totally art as an experience, right? Is I'm all about that. But it's something that can happen over and over and over and over again, right? Because you have this experience, you put it out on a canvas, someone walks in, they look at that canvas, they have experience, they carry that with them the rest of their lives, and then there's just a web of art and experiences just going over and over and over again. And that, I think, is the true power of art, right? Is the fact that it's just this, it's never ending experiences, right? Because of someone willing to not be afraid and share their true self.
Right. Because one of my favorite, greatest influences is cave art. So before there were businessmen, before there were politicians, before there were countries, before there were religions, there were artists.
Right.
This innate aspect of the human being to express itself, to communicate, because art is a means of communication. So when I was teaching, I would ask my students, what are you trying to say? And seek clarity on that. So it has I would call it an infinite nature, because here we have art from 45,000 years ago, still inspiring and creating all today. But today I would define it as timeless, because it's always experienced in the eternal moment of now. There is no time to now. It simply is. And so it fundamentally came down to me answering the question, what am I? Who am I? And I got to that question by removing and releasing all that I am not.
I like that. Okay. Wow.
When I think of the cave paintings, I think of, when they put their hands on the walls, they said, I am here. And that's, for me, what I'm circling in this conversation is art is really the revelation that I am here in my true authentic self. And to have the courage to stand in that is really brave. I am
very brave. And we all have it. And what we do, back to the oneness, say you feel you lack that courage, I stand next to you and say, I see courage. I'll stand here with you while you find your courage.
Wow, I love that.
And the love grows, and the love grows, and the love grows, because the oneness, it's not me helping you. There is no you to help. But I see myself in you. You see yourself in me. And I've moved through these fears. I will stand with you while you move through you. Because it is just a construction of the mind. It is false.
I think that's what we as artists moving are really doing. That's why we exist.
I love it.
Right?
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us
Not
today.
at all. It's a pleasure.
I feel like I could talk to you for like the rest of the day, but
For infinity.
We're infinity, yeah.
For now. Right? Well, thank you so much for being willing to have me on and overcoming any doubts or fears or whatever you might have had about having
That's
this
right. I
unknown
love
guy
it.
on here. It's been
I
a
loved
great
it.
pleasure.